The most notorious king of England was Henry VIII, and he is most known for his 6 wives and his marriages that ended in tragedy and brutality. Henry ordered 2 of his own wives to be executed inside the Tower of London by axe and also sword, and he also saw his 3rd wife, Jane Seymour, die inside of Hampton Court Palace following giving birth to the king's successor. But Henry's luckiest and most fortunate wife was Anne of Cleves, his 4th. Who, following the dissolving of their marriage, received a huge amount of property and lived the rest of her life in comfort inside of royal palaces. She was waited on by her own household and was given the title of the king's sister. She also was the longest living of Henry's wives and even outlived Henry's successor. But her own death was rather painful and prolonged. But what did Anne die from? Anne of Cleves came to England following the arrangements to marry Henry VIII being finalised. She arrived in England and the marriage was doomed to fail from the very start. Anne was not the most well-educated compared to others, and she was skilled in needlework and enjoyed playing card games in her spare time, but she could only read and write in German, and she did not speak the best English. She was a gentle and calm woman and was considered a good choice for the king. She was said to have been of middling beauty and a very assured and resolute countenance. She had a nice face, and another writer wrote, her hair hanging down, which was fair yellow and long, and she was apparelled after the English fashion with a French hood, which so set forth her beauty and good visage, that every creature rejoiced to behold her. She first met King Henry VIII in private on New Year's Day 1540, and it followed courtly love traditions as he entered the room in disguise, and Anne did not know who the king was and did not realise who her husband was. It was said that Henry so went up into the chamber where the said Lady Anne was looking out of a window to see the bull baiting, which was going on in the courtyard, and suddenly he embraced and kissed her, and showed her a token which the king had sent her for New Year's gift. And she, being abashed and not knowing who it was, thanked him, and so he spoke with her. But she regarded him little, but always looked out the window. And when the king saw that she took so little notice of his coming in, he went into another chamber, took off his cloak, and came in again in a coat of purple velvet. And when the lords and knights saw his grace, they did him reverence. It didn't go well. Anne offended the king greatly, and he also claimed that she was not as beautiful as he believed, and he felt that he had been sold a lie by Hans Holbein's painting. Anne did not realise who he was, and when the king told her who he really was, he was also put off the marriage. The pair met then on the 3rd of January 1540, and a huge celebration took place. But the king, following the marriage, claimed that he could not consummate the marriage, and he thought that his chief adviser, Thomas Cromwell, had sold him a lie. He claimed, "She is nothing so fair as she hath reported," and he continued to complain, but he could not get out of the marriage which occurred on the 6th of January inside the Palace of Placentia. The marriage remained unconsummated, and Anne later said that her husband, that "when he comes to bed he kisseth me, and he taketh me by the hand, and biddeth me good night, sweetheart, and in the morning kisseth me, and biddeth farewell, darling." But within months she was ordered to leave the royal court. She was informed her husband did not want to continue with the marriage. The annulment then went through on the 12th of July 1540, and after this Anne of Cleves was given a huge amount of land and also property. She was given the former home of Anne Boleyn, Hever Castle, as well as Richmond Palace, and she and her former husband remained good friends, and she was treated as the king's beloved sister. She also came to court, and Henry VIII enjoyed her company and conversation. But after the execution of Henry's 5th wife, Catherine Howard, some considered that he and Anne of Cleves should get back together, but instead he went for Catherine Parr, a woman that Anne did not like. Anne continued to live very carefully, and she then, in the years after, lived a quiet life. She was seen as a possible threat during the reign of Queen Mary I, as a Protestant rebellion emerged, and this also led to the future Queen Elizabeth I being locked up inside the Tower of London. She was closely associated with Elizabeth, and some thought she may have been plotting against the Queen. But by July 1557, Anne of Cleves was rather ill, and she got severely poorly as the months continued. She was quite ill for some time, and could not get out of bed, and Anne must have known that her death was coming, because she then drafted her last will, and she considered what to do with her possessions and objects. Anne claimed that there should be money left for people inside of her household to live, and she wanted her loyal attendants to be rewarded for their years of service. This included her grooms, ladies, gentlemen of the household, and every one of these people she listed by name, and this showed the amount of respect she had for these people. She also stated that her jewellery should be sent back to Germany and her family members, and that some of her rings and jewellery should then be sent to her stepdaughters, Mary I, and then the future Queen, Elizabeth I. Anne of Cleves was living inside of Chelsea Old Manor in the final days of her life. She died on the 16th of July 1557, and one theory as to what she died from was that she succumbed to cancer and that she had been suffering with this for months. The deterioration of her and the pain she was in alludes to this, and that she suffered with a serious illness before she died. It wasn't a sudden death. Following her death, Anne of Cleves was embalmed, and her vital organs were removed to be buried away from her body, and this included her heart being cut out, and the cavity was then filled with spices to keep away decay. She was then sent on a large procession to Westminster Abbey for her funeral. It was said of this that, on the 3rd day of August, my lady, Anne of Cleves, sometimes wife to Henry VIII, came from Chelsea to be buried in Westminster, with all the children of Westminster and many priests and clerks and the monks of Westminster, and my Lord Bishop of London and my Lord Abbot of Westminster rode together. Many of the prominent politicians of the time attended, and there were 100 torches burning, being carried by her servants. The procession was huge and large, and she was then taken into Westminster Abbey. Her coffin was then taken to her tomb, and she was interred with cloth of gold laid over her face. Following this, the officers of her household broke their staves of office and threw them into the tomb. The 4th wife of King Henry VIII was the luckiest wife of the Tudor king. She managed to live the rest of her life comfortably, but she would die from a terrible illness, and she knew that her death was on the horizon, which is rather troubling. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.